Well, good morning. My name is Jackie Anderson, and I'm an assistant dean at the University of St. Thomas. Thanks for joining us for an online learning series and a little jazz this morning. Today's session is Successfully Dealing with Conflict with Dr. Andrea Molberg. I'm going to introduce Andrea in a moment, but as we are starting to wind down our weekly summer online learning series, I want to make sure you have on your calendar the capstone event. The final session for this year's summer series is on Thursday, August 27th, and it's Don McPherson with a session titled 12 Trends of Living and Working. Now, Don's entire career is focused on identifying patterns in order to anticipate future trends. He's the founder of the 12 Geniuses podcast, and formerly he was the president of Modern Survey. I can't think of a better way to wrap up this summer's series than looking forward to the future. So with the conclusion of next week's event, we're going to be sending out a survey to you all in hopes that you will give us some feedback so we have learnings as we continue on in the fall with our regular online learning series. It's a monthly event that again addresses relevant business topics, but we want your feedback on your experiences, what topics you enjoyed the most this summer, and what you'd like to see in the future. So please take a few minutes after the next session to complete that survey. So with that, the plan for today, in a moment, I'm going to hand over this digital platform to Dr. Molberg. As always, please feel free to use the chat feature with any questions at any time during the session. As usual, I will try to save most of the questions for the end so we can group them, and we will try to wrap up no later than 8:55. Now, if you have any difficulty or you need to step away for any reason, don't worry. The whole session is being recorded and you should receive a link within 2 business days. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Andrea Molberg. Andrea was a professor at the University of St. Thomas for decades. And during that time, she received many accolades for her teaching, including being chosen as Teacher of the Year in Social Sciences. However, to escape Minnesota winters, Andrea did move to Tucson, and she's now a consultant, a trainer, an author, and a coach. Andrea has a PhD from the University of Minnesota in organizational psychology and counseling psychology, and she's just released a new book titled Emergency Kit for Finding Common Ground, Helping Americans Get Along. Personally or professionally, the topic of conflict couldn't be more important. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the University of St. Thomas, Dr. Andrea Molberg.
Good morning. I'm delighted to be back home, if you will. Having been at St. Thomas and worked, still considering myself a Minnesotan, I'm delighted to be with you. I'm honored to be with you to talk about something I consider really important. I'm an applied psychologist, so though an educator, I've always been trying to think about how can we use what we know, how can we apply skills, and the ideas we'll talk about this morning are things that I have used as a consultant, executive coach, and also taught in thousands of workshops across the country to Fortune 500s, the Mayo Clinic, IBM, 3M, Minnesota homegrown organizations, and others, as well as other educational institutions. So I'm delighted you're here, and I hope that you will be thinking about the conflicts you face and whether or not what I talk about is going to be applicable both in your personal lives and as a leader, because conflict is really a leadership challenge. Conflict and leadership go hand in hand. As Jackie mentioned, I have recently completed a book, never thinking about applying the skills to the political world until now, and looking for ways to bring people together so that they can disagree without being disagreeable. The kinds of skills that I've used as a consultant when I work with a group of people who hate each other and try to help them get along, or coach leaders, or even select people for positions to see if they can manage what they might face in the positions that they're going to be filling. So what I'd like to talk about are 3 major things. What causes conflict, so we have an understanding of barriers and and errors that are commonly made. Then we'll look at some choices for handling conflict in a more hopefully effective way. Unfortunately, most of us use options instead of realizing we have as many, and we don't choose a style, we use a style. And then I want to get specific and practical, as I said, apply those ideas to some situations, thinking about some tools that you might walk away with. And some of those are in that book that I've just completed, Emergency Kit for Finding Common Ground, where the chapters include how do you manage conflict, how do you repair relationships, and that would be true both for home and at work, how to get off the defensive, how to influence across a divide, how to overcome resistance, and so on. But let me start with a question for you, if you're willing to think about it with me. When you hear the word conflict, whether it's at work or at home, what do you associate with it? Jackie, will you pick up a couple of chats for me and let me know what people associate with conflict? Because I've asked this question across the country and I get a variety of answers. What do you think?
Feel free to enter some things into the chat. It's starting to roll. Stressful, low trust, discomfort, the need to fix it, arguments, different approaches, different opinions, tension, resistance.
Yes. And notice how most of those are negative. I mean, for most people, it's awful. It's something they want to get rid of. I hear things like war. I hear marriage. I hear kids. Those are reactions mostly negative. But every once in a while, somebody will tell me fun. That when things are too boring, they will pick a fight because it's stimulating, it's engaging, it's involving. So conflict can be positive or negative. What's crucial is how people handle it, how they deal with it. Now, if we get realistic, there are really financial costs to conflict. And the worldwide study done in 2008 of workplace conflict came up with statistics like this. Look at the hours spent on conflict. And if you calculate that at about $18 an hour, we're looking at a lot of money and a lot of work days. But it's not just the time spent. It's also people being sick and not being at work, project failures, and people being fired or people quitting. There is a cost to workplace drama, workplace conflict. And one of the big ones that I hear when I work with leaders is, oh man, I'm afraid that some of my talent will walk out the door. And they do, because they can, and look for a place where the environment is more positive for them. So I'm wondering how you deal with conflict. About a third of the managers surveyed feel skilled. Less than that percentage of their employees feel like they handle it well. And of course, what worries me is the data that indicates most of us who are not performing well rate ourselves higher than other people rate us. We don't know that we're not competent. We end up like the emperor in his new clothes. And I hope that is something you're thinking about so that you become more adept at handling our differences. There are some benefits, I want to emphasize, of handling conflict. 81% of workers in the US report seeing and experiencing positive things in conflict, understanding people better, getting along better, actually improving and repairing the relationships when it's managed and dealt with well, better solutions, innovations, higher productivity. So positive outcomes. In addition, in the broader sense, more trust, more peace, more motivation, because if you handle that conflict well, there's less stress and more energy available for other things. But we are also, in our personal lives, dangerously divided right now. And so not only are you facing conflict at work, but conversations, everyday conversations are tense and difficult and avoided. And almost everything will set people off. So we need to move from less respectful, negative, difficult conversations where they're not fact-based and they're not substantive and people aren't talking to each other. The conversation's much more like this. I'm trying to understand, and me too. It helps, I think, if we understand the root of conflict. It allows often for us to handle it more effectively. So take a moment and think about recent conflicts you've been in. What were you fighting about? Or what were others fighting about? And what comes to mind? Would you monitor those chats again for me, Jackie?
Yes, front and center is politics.
Yep. How about in the workplace? What else do we talk about? What else do we fight about?
Opinions without facts, miscommunication, power struggles.
Yes, yes. So power. Anybody ever had a fight about money? If you haven't, I'd like to get to know you well, because money and space and time and equipment and power and authority are all limited resources. And what happens when we have limited resources is that we discover, we may have different goals. If I want the money and you want me to have the money, now we have the same goal. If I want the money and you want the money, or you want the power, now we have different goals. Or if I think my opinions are better than yours, it could be a difference of views, difference of preferences, difference of style. Ever had a personality conflict with someone? Sure. What they do, their habits, the way they do things is rubbing you the wrong way. You prefer yours to theirs. And what happens then really is that the root of conflict are differences. Different beliefs, hopes, values, preferences, styles, views, goals, values, so on. Now, that's normal. Why is conflict so awful for us if it's normal for us to differ? Because we differ on almost everything. Well, what happens is that when we differ, at some level we realize, we're going to have to choose. And if we choose, there's a danger I might lose. And heaven forbid, that triggers an automatic response in the reptilian part of our brain. And that fear response leads us to get ready to run or to attack, or sometimes we just experience fright instead of flight or fight. But there's a change in breathing rate, there's a change in the galvanic skin response. Isn't that a lovely way to say sweating? There's a change in the amount of oxygen in our blood, the amount of blood that pumps to our muscles, and they pump to our large muscles to get us ready to hit someone, get us ready to run. Those are useful responses sometimes, but rarely, and often, they get us into trouble. So one of the most important things for dealing with conflict is being able to handle and reduce fear and get the neocortex, the thinking part of our brain, working. It responds slower than that automatic response, the perception of, I'm going to lose, and fear. Many people are encouraged or have zero-sum thinking. You know what it's like, the win-lose thinking. So that if I win, you're going to lose. But if you win, I'm going to lose. And heaven forbid, I don't want that to happen. Instead, to deal with conflict effectively, what's important is to help people recognize and see that we can maximize gains and minimize losses. We can grow the pie rather than just split the pie. So, differences trigger conflict. And if you look at that list of common differences over facts, preferences, approaches, goals, and values, the higher you go on the list, typically the more emotion that's connected and the more difficult the conflict. But these days, we have such emotion tied up to even differences in our facts and the way that we would handle something. Let me give you an example. Can you see on your screen Finished files are the result of years of scientific study combined with the experience of many years. Is that there? Okay, do something for me. Count the number of Fs, A, B, C, D, E, F. Count the number of Fs that you can see now. And Jackie, would you help me with those numbers?
Sure. 3, 3, 4, 4, 6. I'm getting 6s and 3s, or 6s, 4s.
Yeah.
I got
Isn't that amazing? You're all looking at the same thing. And yet you're seeing different numbers of Fs. The first time I saw this, I would have laid money on the fact that there were 3 Fs. There are 6. If you didn't see all 6, let me point them out. The F in finished, beginning of files, but then also the Fs in the others, which are the ones you probably didn't see. There are 3 there, and then the F in scientific. Isn't that amazing? You're looking at the same thing. You probably were convinced you were right, and yet we still differ. It's possible to differ, and that's what triggers so much conflict. But it's even possible to be right and differ. If I were to show you a glass, this is not one, but if I were to show you a glass filled with 4 ounces of clear liquid and ask you to describe it for me, you might tell me the receptacle is filled with, half full or half empty. And in both cases, you'd be right. You'd be right and still differ. So being right doesn't automatically make somebody else wrong. And it's possible to be convinced you're right and still be wrong. Those kinds of things trigger some of the animosity that we experience in the workplace and in our personal lives. Why can't we agree on facts? Sometimes we have the wrong facts, sometimes we misunderstand them, and sometimes people are lying to us. So they're intentionally dis and misinforming. So it's easy then to differ. I think about 3 blind people, the old story of 3 blind people touching an elephant. One of them is touching the tail, one is touching the tusk, one is touching the ear. And their descriptions of that elephant are very accurate, but they're very different. We often don't see the whole picture, and we don't know what we don't know. So it's common for us to disagree. That's normal. And we also disagree when we cherry pick facts, when we pick the ones that seem to prove our case. We have common cognitive biases or cognitive habits. All of us humans do. We rely on information that's easily available. So if I'm reading one source and you're reading something else, we're likely to have different set of facts, different opinions, different views, different perspectives. And then if an idea is uncomfortable for me, if it competes with something else, then I'll want to reduce that tension. We shrinks call that cognitive dissonance. And one way to reduce the tension between what I think and what I'm just reading is even to ignore what I'm just reading or new information, and to listen instead to whatever information confirms my existing view. I remember very vividly the first time that I saw and showed a videotape to folks that was carefully structured to present information on 2 different sides, and then asked people to tell me what they remembered. It was almost as if they'd heard 2 or watched 2 different videotapes. We hear and remember what fits with our existing views, and we even seek out information that confirms what we already think. So if I want to think I'm a good employee, I'll look for data to prove that. If I want to think that your political views are wrong, I'll look for data and views and examples and opinions that help support that position of mine. We also have not only this source credibility issue, but we have a tendency to overestimate ourselves. And that's been called the Dunningkruger effect because of the researchers who found it. And they found that most of us think we're above average on almost everything. Driving ability, singing ability, intelligence, performance, almost everything. Now that's scary. I know Lake Wobegon, and people believe that their kids are beautiful and everybody is strong, but wait a minute, we're not all above average, and most of us are not above average. That's not the way the data works. What that means is that incompetence is often blessed with confidence, and that is dangerous. So, for example, poor performers in the workplace and people who are misinformed are overrating their views and what they know. And in addition, they're failing to recognize genuine skill and expertise of others and failing to recognize their own mistakes and their lack of skill. Inappropriate, misjudging. And the truth is, all opinions are not equal on a particular subject. You may know a lot more about finance. I may know a lot more about psychology. Other people may know a lot more about computers or technology or construction or plumbing repair. And I respect those differences. But my opinions on each of those subjects should not be seen as equal to yours on all of those subjects. So we have cognitive errors, biases, habits, tendencies, and they make our differences even more difficult to manage. All right, so how can we deal with conflict? What are some options? The best known way to measure conflict management styles and conflict resolution approaches is Thomas and Kilman's conflict mode instrument. And Thomas and Kilman talk about 5 styles, ranging from very uncooperative to very cooperative on one dimension, and very indirect to very direct on the vertical dimension. Let me use animal analogies. I hope I'm not insulting you by doing that. But if you look at the 2 green styles, the avoiding style, I call that the turtle. This is the person who doesn't speak out, who pulls in and hides when there's a difference. Now, I may be a turtle in one situation, and I may be a lamb in another, which is the accommodating style, where I'm very cooperative. I just don't tell you what I'm thinking. Or I could be a shark. I might be a shark at work and a lamb at home. A shark is the competing style, very direct, but very uncooperative. No one style works in all situations. And there are 2 others that I don't have good animal analogies for. One is the compromising style, where we split the difference. And the other is the co-laboring style, collaborative, where we merge, work together, and look for common situations and solutions that would be considered good for you and good for me at the same time. Now, Filippo's description of conflict resolution styles includes 2 more styles that leaders need to always remember as well, and those are arbitration and mediation. You'll see in the rest of the chart, the turtle and lamb, the green ones, the withdrawal and retreat is the turtle, the smoothing over and delay is the nice accommodating lamb, the forcing of a win, I can do it to you or you can do it to me, there's that win-lose shark, direct and very aggressive. And then the collaborative problem-solving style is the term used by Filippo to talk about the collaborative. So mediation and arbitration are 2 additional conflict resolution styles. They involve a third party. And right now I really wish America had a third party to serve as a mediator or arbitrator to help us get along more effectively. Let's take a moment, if you're willing, to think about when should you use each style, because no style works 100% of the time. There are advantages and disadvantages, and it's a choice I hope that we make, that we use reason to decide, ooh, in this situation, the turtle approach might be a good way to deal with our differences. When should you choose to avoid? Well, Thomas and Kilman went around the country asking that question, and their data is prescriptive. In other words, here's the advice. When should you avoid? First time, when it's too dangerous not to. In other words, when the costs of discussing differences is greater than the benefits. Time to keep your mouth shut. I think about Jackie Flug, who was a flight attendant on a TWA flight that was hijacked way back in the 80s. And Jackie and I were keynote speakers at similar conferences, so we had a chance to get to know each other a little. The hijackers shot other, they shot first the Israelis and threw them out, and then they went to shooting the crew. And Jackie was a flight attendant who was shot in the head and thrown out on the tarmac. Now, she had noticed that if somebody moved on the tarmac, they were shot again. So when she was thrown out, she did not reveal, she played possum, she did not reveal she was still alive. It saved her life. So if the costs of speaking out are too great, time to keep your mouth shut. Or if there's no chance to change somebody's mind. I remember driving once to a polling booth with a dear friend of mine. Her vote was going to cancel mine out. We did not talk about the votes that we were going to cast because we knew we were not going to change the other person's mind. On trivial issues, that's a good time to keep your mouth shut. When it's not important. Or when the issue's a tangent. Let me give you an example. Very often when fights get heated, especially at home, somebody will bring up, and your mother's the same way. Leave the mother out of the discussion. Stay on the issues. So avoid or be a turtle on tangents. Go back to the differences that are at the moment the ones to be addressed. Sometimes it just makes sense to keep your mouth shut to cool off. You're not ready. You are going to be too defensive. What you say will not be helpful and productive. Another time is when you don't yet know the position you want to take. You're still gathering information and you're not ready to make a good first impression on this issue. So wait as a turtle. Another time, when somebody else can resolve it better than you. They may be more prepared, they may have more credibility, so let them. So sometimes in a leadership role, you may choose to hold back and let others resolve the issue and only be there if necessary to make sure that power is not being abused. All right, if that's when to be a turtle, when should you be a lamb? When you're wrong. You don't even have to admit you were wrong. You can just go along like an accommodating lamb. But another time is when the issue is more important to the other person or the other parties than it is to you. Let's say we're trying to decide where to go for lunch in days when it's safe, or even eating outside when the weather's decent now in the age of COVID. You might suggest let's go have Chinese food, Thai food, Asian food. I might have been thinking Mexican, but I like both and I'm going to be well fed. It doesn't matter. I can go along and not even bring up the fact that I had thought about a different lunch option. Another time to go along is when I really care more about the relationship than the issue, when harmony is especially important. But sometimes people do it for the wrong reason. They go along to build credits for later. They give here, they give there, but then they don't disclose that they're doing that. They're actually creating a psychological contract without the other person's knowledge, because if you later on call in your markers, I gave in on this, I gave in on that, the other person says, wait a minute, I thought we'd agreed. And so you've created conflict over the fact that you did not disclose your views. Be careful. It's typically safer to let somebody know, sure, I can do that, but you're going to owe me. And that way, there is not resentment being built. When else should you accommodate? When you're outmatched. Maybe you're not going to be shot in the head on a flight, but maybe somebody will come up to you with a gun or a knife in your face and say your wallet or your life. Go along and give them your wallet. So there are times when we don't have enough power. We don't have enough ability to make something happen. And that's a time to be a lamb. Another time, to let other people learn and develop. Certainly as a parent, And certainly as a manager or leader, there have been times when you've said, oh, I think my idea is better than theirs, but theirs isn't dangerous. Let's go with it because they're excited about it. And in the process, you may learn their idea was even better than yours. And they have a chance to exercise their thinking and decision-making muscles. Okay, so we can choose to be a turtle, we can choose to be a lamb, we can even choose to be direct and uncooperative, and sometimes that's the right choice. In emergency situations, people are barking out orders. They're not showing cooperation, they're showing directness because it's a fast, quick approach. So in ERs and EDs, in ORs, in military situations, when speed is of the essence, somebody's about to be hit by a car, jump in and directly intervene. Sometimes we do it when the action we have to take is extremely important. It's going to save the organization. It's going to save the family. It's going to save the budget. It may be unpopular, but it's crucial to do. Also, when you know you're right, is when we tend to be direct and uncooperative. Just be careful. It could be that the other person's also right. It could be that I'm touching the tusk of that elephant and I don't know what that whole picture is. And then we also are direct and uncooperative to protect ourselves. A very dear friend of mine was stabbed in broad daylight in Rochester, Minnesota on a winter snowy day. Luckily, she fought back and is alive to talk about it. And finally, I use this direct, uncooperative style as a fallback. I keep it in my emergency kit because sometimes I've tried collaboration, we've looked at compromise, it's not working, and the issue is so important you still have to push. So it may be a fallback position. But I prefer, when possible, to use compromise or collaboration. So let's take a look at those two. When is it a good idea to compromise? Moderately important issues. In other words, they're not trivial. If they were trivial, I could just be a turtle. They're not so important that I have to push like a shark, but I can't let them go. Or when the power between the parties is pretty equal. That's a time to show a willingness to hear both sides and to share by splitting the difference. Sometimes we do it short-term, temporary settlement, a ceasefire, if you will, rather than negotiating a long-lasting peace, but it may be a temporary way to deal with the situation. And sometimes, because of time, it's faster than collaboration. Again, it's a good backup strategy. But when should you collaborate, which is my favorite? I love to encourage people to use this style when it's appropriate, even though there are times to use the others. Collaboration really works when you value and see a reason to bring in parts of one view, add them to another, and 2 and 2 are giving you 5 rather than 4. Come up with innovative solutions, creative ones with a piece of this and a piece of that, and sometimes even some craziness thrown in. Collaboration allows us to understand other people's views, learn from them, merge insights. But the real payoff, of course, is the extra commitment that comes when people are part of a solution. And at home, and even in the workplace, because people are avoiding conflicts, avoiding coworkers, a chance to work through hard feelings and understand each other better. So how do you choose? 3 major factors are usually important in deciding which style, which mode for dealing with conflict is going to be a good one here. The first factor, how important that decision is. On really important decisions, you're going to be more involved. You won't look at potentially being a turtle. Time is a factor. Some of the styles work faster than others. And the third is, how important is it that the other person accepts and likes whatever resolution you come to? When both quality and acceptability are important. You want a really good decision and you want people to like it enough so that they're invested and involved and they'll implement it, and you have enough time. That's when you'll use collaboration. 3 major factors: the importance of the decision, its acceptability, and then do you have enough time to collaborate? One of my favorite examples that comes from Fisher and Urey's Getting to Yes of the Harvard Negotiation Project is thinking about how we approach our negotiations or our bargaining. Are we doing it positionally or are we doing it with principle? And the story they give, and it's not even theirs, I don't think, but the story they give is of 2 people in a library in days when you could open windows in libraries and people went to libraries. One person's opening a window, the other person goes over and closes the window, somebody goes back and opens it, somebody else goes back, person number 2 goes back and closes it, so we get the and finally the librarian goes over and asks the first person, why are you opening the window? And the answer is, I want fresh air. The librarian goes to the second person and says, why are you closing the window? I don't want to sit in the draft. With great wisdom, the librarian goes to the room next door, gets a fan, turns it on, and provides fresh air and yet no draft to person number 2. The librarian got behind the positions. We weren't fighting for a window open or closed. The issue was, could I get fresh air? Can I stay out of a draft? That's a win-win to find an alternative that meets the needs of everybody as much as possible. What would a compromise have been? The window half open. Or those of us with kids set a timer, and the timer, you've got the window open for 15 minutes and you have it closed for 15 minutes. So the danger is I see way too many people positionally bargaining. They're in a win-lose mode, and they're negotiating, not really. They're fighting toward their own advantage. They want to win. But principled negotiators want to win too. They just don't want to win at everybody else's expense, because they realize to get something implemented, to have it be a lasting decision and to create a situation where the relationship is preserved enough that people are willing to negotiate again, you want mutual satisfaction. So you want good outcomes, you want to reach them efficiently, but you want to reach them amicably. Maximizing gains, minimizing losses, as I mentioned before. So principled negotiation is basically attacking problems, not people, focusing on the underlying concerns, not just a position that's supposedly going to meet those underlying issues, inventing ways that we all can win as much as possible, and then looking for fairness criteria that help us know whether or not we've gotten them. You know the problem-solving negotiation sequence, and as a mediator or an arbitrator, you may be using these steps. I hope you also realize that the tendency for most people is to jump straight to steps 3 and 4, without really figuring out what are we after, without really exploring and brainstorming in an expansive, creative way. What could we be thinking about? What else could we do? Too quickly, people hone in on a solution, evaluate and judge others, write them off, choose an approach, instead of spending enough time at steps 1 and 2. So one of the things that I like to do when I'm serving as a consultant or even as an executive coach is to sit down with teams, with married couples, with individuals, with even committees, and explore what are your needs and wants. What are you after? What's that position designed for? What are you hoping to accomplish? And look for similarities. Look for common ground. Oh, you want that too. You care about that. Because we may all want our kids educated. We may differ on how to get there. So we have different approaches. Our conflict is over the approach. But at least we've got the common ground of caring. We may all want the economy functioning, and we want people in their jobs and able to perform. We may differ about how we think that could happen. Look for the common ground. So what do people need and want? What options you have? And brainstorm even additional ones. Okay, so conflict comes from differences. There are barriers, our cognitive habits and biases, our cherry picking, our assumption that we're right and others aren't. We have choices we can make if we stop and think and don't just automatically respond with fear, with flight or fight or even fright. But it really helps to be skilled. Tools reduce fear. So I want to spend just a few more minutes on a couple things that you might take with you. I like to be practical. I like to make sure that we can use some ideas. And as you think about what on earth is collaboration, it involves showing both cooperation and reasonableness while you're strong and direct. So it's that merging, it's the combination of both. And how do you demonstrate that you are cooperative and strong at the same time? One way is eye contact, but not too much. Too much can be encouraging an attack dog. If you do it with alpha dogs, look out, you're inviting them to attack you. I even tried it in the Caribbean once. I looked directly at a monkey to see if they exhibited that reaction, and yes, I got bitten by a monkey in the Caribbean. So eye contact can be a symbol of too much attack, and moderating it is important. How do you moderate it? Sometimes, even with a mask, you think about smiling, because your eyes will crinkle. I've earned all these wrinkles. The eyes will crinkle, and that's a way of demonstrating it's not a sneer. It is a real smile. And soften the eye contact by looking away occasionally. You'll do that anyway when you're a little bit nervous. And at times, dim the lights instead of the direct stare. We can do that on Zoom as well as face-to-face. Watch your voice. One of the reasons that organizations will, in customer service areas, actually install mirrors is so that people will look at themselves and smile at themselves, and it will show up in their voice and in their eyes. But as we talk to others, sound like you like them, even if you don't yet, because hopefully you'll begin to. And the more you act as if you expect a fight, I guarantee the more likely you are to get one. So watch your voice and your position. Instead of being straight on at times, soften it. And think about getting close, but sometimes not too close, so it feels safe. People need to feel safe and respected. What makes conflict worse? Defensiveness. When we feel judged or controlled or manipulated, when we feel somebody doesn't care about us, or they think they're better than we are, or their mind is closed. And that's the one that I see so often these days. That triggers defensiveness and the need to get ready to fight or to run. Instead, if you can describe situations in a genuine, warm, caring, respectful way, with an open mind, willing to have a position, but even to think about other views, who can resist you? So you're so wonderful. So how do you get there? One of the ways is with a technique, very simple, called I statements. Instead of saying to somebody, you're wrong, use an I and punch it. I think you're wrong. Or better yet, oh, I saw it differently. The I, me, or my ahead of the word you in a sentence, or instead of the word you, will seem more open-minded, more respectful, and increase the chances that the two of you can discuss issues instead of get into a debate and a fight. Listen and learn rather than declare and debate enables real common ground collaboration. So when you're thinking, what? Tell me more. Shift gears. Or I'm interested in what you're thinking. Or I respect you. So I'm noticing we differ. I'd like to hear how you arrived. It at that position. I must be missing something. Explore, get people curious instead of fighting. And another technique I use that I describe in the book is the skill of fogging. It's my favorite technique, and it works even if people know you're using it. It's a way to calmly agree. It's a script to use to act calmer than you feel, but enable yourself to calm down. How do you fog? How do you calmly agree? One of three ways. You can agree with what they're saying on the surface, just for the moment. You're right. So if somebody said, you voted for so-and-so? Yes, Or you're in that position? That's true. You're ignoring the attack and listening to the surface of what they've said and finding something there that you can agree with. More often, I guess, I use the fog of agreeing with the possibility they're right. So I'll say, you might have a point there. There could be some truth in that. Maybe so. Notice you pause first. You act as if you're thinking about it. You aren't yet. This is just a script. And later on, when you're calmer, you can disclose your real position. But at first, you're just trying to get yourself under control if you decide to use fogging. So when someone hits my hot button, I'll hit my fog button in order to regain some self-control and get my neocortex working to have a collaborative discussion. The one I use when I'm really needing to get myself under control is the third one. And I typically have water available so that, this is H2O, nothing in it, so that if somebody says something I can't agree with, I can agree not with truth or possible truth, but I can agree with perception. I'll give you an example. A mandated client of mine, in other words, his behavior needed to change according to the organization, or he was not going to retain his executive position. He came in and he said to me, Molberg, you're trying to ruin my career. I couldn't say you're right. I couldn't even say you may be right. The only option I had was fog number 3. So I grabbed my water and calmly said, with hopefully curiosity as I delivered this rehearsed script, it could look that way. It did look that way to him. Now, I didn't say it could look that way to you or to somebody with your vision. It could look that way. I was working with 3 brothers who inherited a company and they hated each other. Their father had pitted them against each other for 50-some years, died, left the company to the 3 of them, and they were in constant conflict. The attorney for the organization brought me in. He said, will you please help them manage their conflicts? And I taught them the fogging skill. Let me give you an example of when they applied it. They were talking again about something very contentious, and one brother reached into his suit coat, and I thought, oh my goodness, this is going to be time number 2 that I see a gun in a consulting situation. He didn't pull out a gun. He pulled out a 3x5 index card, and all he did was read off it. It could look that way, and we all laughed. We knew what he was doing. He was trying to control himself. He was trying to reduce defensiveness so that a discussion could occur about the issues. One of my very favorite skills. I encourage you to think about looking at how you could agree with truth, possible truth, or perception until you're calm enough to have a good, open discussion and say, tell me more, and let's think about it, and let's look for solutions. Sometimes they'll ask you a question and you have to throw it back. Psychologists answer a question with a question. That's what we call volleyball. Somebody says, why do you look? You think we shouldn't? And that's a technique for getting ready for them to say, no, you shouldn't. And then you can say, you might have a point. It's a fogging. Well, I wish I had time to spend with more of the skills that I've stuffed into the emergency kit for finding common ground, because I'm desperate to help us get along better. I've focused on getting along at home and in the workplace. Now I'm even thinking about how do we get along in this political world. But I know we're going to have time. We wanted to have time for Q&A, for questions and answers. Would you please shoot some my direction? I'd love to get involved in discussing them with you.
And first of all, Andrea, thank you so much. That was a fabulous presentation and so insightful. And as you anticipated, we have our chat blowing up with questions. So I'm going to try to get through a couple before we hit 8:55. The first one, how do we let our awareness of the Dunningkruger confidence not affect our actual confidence in the workplace, where we feel we are not good at anything?
Excellent question. The evidence indicates outstanding performers underrate their performance. Poor performers overrate their performance. I'm glad that you worry. If you're an outstanding performer, I'm glad you worry occasionally, because that makes you coachable, it makes you reflect, it makes you grow. So gather data, find out what other people think, examine where you really are.
Great, thank you. And actually there was one link to that. What if it's someone who's senior to you that may be overconfident and may not have the skill?
Carefully point out extra data that they may need to help them see. That their view may be that they're missing the fact that they are not performing well here. So comments like, I'm wondering about if you've seen this information. Would it be helpful if I let you know what I've been hearing? And notice I'm asking for permission to do it. I'm using I statements. I'm with my voice, face, and body indicating I'm not trying to usurp your position. But I'm also going to be strong enough about wanting you to succeed, because I don't want you to be the emperor in the new clothes, in the no clothes, walking down the street.
Thank you for that. Next question. Any suggestions for when the I statement backfires? For example, oh, it's all about you all the time, isn't it?
Wow. I'm sorry it looks that way. That was not my intent. Talk about your intentions. All of us make mistakes. When we're skilled, we make fewer of them. We get out of them faster, but we still make mistakes. So go back to your intention. You may acknowledge and admit, wow, that did happen. It was not what I wanted to have happen. Here's what I was hoping instead.
All right. Thank you. And I'm going to try to squeeze one more in before we wrap up here. What's an effective way to have people listen? And then there's another few questions around not being heard causes conflict. So those are kind of interrelated.
Yes. You can ask. It works much better than demanding. So I'm wondering what you heard me say. I might not have been clear. Would you tell me what you heard? An awful lot of marriage therapists ask each of the two to summarize the other person before they state their own view. It slows down the fight in the therapist's office, but it also proves to the other person that it was heard. So I'll often say, would you summarize what you heard me say so I can clear up any confusion I might have caused? I used to think everybody understood me. I've really learned that that's not true.
All right, last question. Are all conflicts resolvable?
No, I wish they were. As long as one of the parties wants the conflict to continue, it will. So conflict resolution hinges on people wanting the conflict to end. And that's what I hope you'll take with you from today. Everybody, not just skills, not just ideas, but actually a caring for people to get along. And that's crucial.
Well, unfortunately, we're running out of time, so I want to tie this together. And first of all, thank you again, Dr. Andrea Molberg, for joining us today. That was wonderful. And we hope you've all enjoyed today's session. Please join us next week on Thursday, August 27th, when Don McPherson joins us as we wrap up our weekly summer online learning series. And if you haven't visited our website, we have new programs being launched. Take a peek. We'd love to see you virtually or hopefully in person sometime soon in one of our programs. Stay safe, stay well. Thank you.